the episode preview for Tuesday, June 23rd. Let us begin by dissecting the deeply troubling situation surrounding Willow Kane. The sheer panic that washed over her face when an uninvited guest appeared at her door was palpable, and if you ask me, it was a moment that perfectly encapsulated the current state of long term storytelling on this show. Willow has been through the ringer, constantly manipulated, lied to, and pushed to the brink by the warring factions of her family. Now, with Jen Sidwell's revenge plot escalating to terrifying new heights, Willow finds herself standing at the threshold of her own home, staring into the face of a threat that could pull her entirely into the underworld's orbit. The knock on that door was not just a plot device, it was the sound of her fragile peace shattering into a million pieces. When we look at Willow's reaction, we must compare her to the strong, defiant women of the past. In the 1990s, heroines like Brenda Barrett or a young Carly Benson would have met such a threat with a fiery, unyielding defiance. They would have grabbed a fire poker, stood their ground, and demanded answers. Willow, however, is written with a persistent vulnerability that, while realistic for a mother trying to protect her children, sometimes strips her of the agency we crave in our leading ladies. The writers are using her as a pawn in Sidwell's grand chessboard, and while the suspense is undeniably gripping, one has to wonder if this constant victimization is truly serving her character integrity. Is she destined to always be the frightened woman in the mansion, or will this uninvited guest finally ignite a spark of ruthless survival within her? Speaking of ruthless survival, Jen Sidwell's sudden and violent attack on Ezra Boyle proves that we are no longer dealing with a mastermind who operates in the shadows. Sidwell is lashing out, striking down his enemies with a visceral aggression that signals a man who is losing control of his own narrative. Ezra Boyle may not be a name that carries the weight of a legacy character, but his brutal victimization at Sidwell's hands serves as a bloody warning to the rest of Port Charles. Sidwell is preparing for his next major move, and by eliminating obstacles in such a public and violent manner, he is sending a message to Sonny Corinthos, Laura Collins, and everyone who dared to cross him. But again, where is the finesse? Where is the psychological warfare that made the villains of yesteryear so legendary? Moving across town to the sophisticated elegance of the Jerome Gallery, we find Ava Jerome in a familiar, yet fundamentally altered position of power. Ethan Lovett arrived bearing a message from Sonny Corinthos, essentially a summons for Ava to present herself to the mob boss. Ava's response was nothing short of magnificent, and it was a rare moment where the writers perfectly captured the essence of a seasoned survivor. She flatly refused to cooperate unless she received a tangible benefit in return. This is the Ava Jerome we know and love, a woman who calculates every breath, every glance, and every negotiation. She knows that stepping into Sonny's orbit without leverage is akin to walking into a lion's den wearing a suit of raw meat. However, the presence of Ethan Lovett as Sonny's errand boy is a bitter pill to swallow for those of us who revere the show's history. Ethan is the biological son of Luke Spencer, a legacy character whose very name evokes the ultimate rebellion against mob rule and authority. Luke spent his life fighting the constraints of organized crime, living by his own chaotic moral compass. To see his son reduced to manipulating power on behalf of a local mobster is a glaring betrayal of character integrity. Why is Ethan playing this game? Is he truly under Sonny's thumb, or is he playing a much longer, more cunning game that we have yet to see? If you ask me, the writers are squandering Ethan's potential by stripping away the Spencer rebellious streak and replacing it with the obedient silence of a hired gun. Meanwhile, the Port Charles Police Department continues to resemble a chaotic circus rather than a functional law enforcement agency. Joe Fitzpatrick's explosive outburst at the precinct, angrily confronting someone for withholding crucial information for far too long, was a moment of sheer, unadulterated frustration that mirrors exactly how the audience feels. We are watching a police force that is constantly steps behind the criminals, fumbling evidence, and allowing men like Jen Sidwell to slip through their fingers with laughable ease. I remember the days when Max Scorpio ran the PCPD. There was order, there was respect, and there was a relentless pursuit of justice that made the police station a formidable setting for drama. Today, the PCPD is merely a backdrop for incompetence, and Joe's anger is the only authentic reaction to the absolute mess they have made of the Sidwell investigation. Amidst all this darkness, there was a fleeting, desperately needed ray of light involving Harrison Chase and Brooklyn Quartermain. Chase delivered some flirtatious, positive news to Brooklyn, and all signs point to a joyous update regarding the adoption of baby Phoebe. Brooklyn is a legacy character in her own right, carrying the formidable, fiery spirit of her grandmother Lila and the sharp, tactical mind of Tracy Quartermain. Watching her navigate the treacherous waters of motherhood and marriage has been one of the few genuinely heartwarming arcs on the canvas. She and Chase have the undeniable chemistry and deep emotional foundation required to be a true super couple for this modern era. Yet, even in this moment of joy, we know that Brooklyn is harboring dark secrets regarding the framed driver and the plot against Willow Kane. This duality, the loving, hopeful mother to be juxtaposed against the scheming, manipulative Quartermain heir, is a testament to long term storytelling done right. We are rooting for her happiness with Chase and Phoebe, but we are also waiting for the inevitable explosion when Chase, a man bound by a rigid moral code, discovers the depths of his wife's deception. It is a classic soap opera tragedy in the making, reminiscent of the great romantic betrayals of the 1980s. The tension reaches an absolute boiling point when we look at the agonizing situation involving Cassius Faison, Lulu Spencer, and Dante Falconeri. Cassius, parading around with the stolen face and identity of our beloved Nathan West, has backed Lulu and Dante into a terrifying corner. He is aggressively pressuring them to make an immediate, life-altering decision regarding the search for their missing son, Rocco, and the desperately sick Britt Westbourne. The psychological cruelty of this moment cannot be overstated. Cassius is weaponizing a mother's grief and a father's desperation, demanding compliance in exchange for the lives of the people they love most. This storyline forces us to look back at the Faison legacy. Cesar Faison was a monster of Shakespearean proportions, a man driven by an obsessive, twisted definition of love. Cassius is proving to be every bit as manipulative, but his methods lack the grandiose theatricality of his predecessor. Instead, he is a cold, calculating opportunist exploiting the vulnerability of a super couple who has already endured too much. Dante and Lulu's history is a tapestry woven with profound love, tragic loss, and undeniable resilience. To see them manipulated by an imposter wearing the face of a hero is a brilliant, albeit excruciating, narrative choice. It tests their bond, their morality, and their sanity in ways we have not seen since the darkest days of the Ryan Chamberlain terror. Finally, we must talk about Trina Robinson, a young woman who has carried the emotional weight of three adults on her shoulders for far too long. In a deeply cathartic and powerful moment, Trina finally snapped. She confronted Curtis and Portia, demanding that they stop making her the center of their endless, exhausting marital drama. She flatly told them to give her less attention and to look at their own fractured relationship instead of using her as a buffer for their pain. This was a masterclass in character growth. If you look back at the classic teen and young adult storylines of the golden era of soap operas, think of Robin Scorpio dealing with her parents' constant espionage drama, or Kimberly McCullough's brilliant portrayal of a child forced to grow up too fast. You see the exact same maturity in Trina today. She is no longer the wide-eyed teenager caught in the crossfire. She is an independent, fiercely intelligent woman setting healthy boundaries. Curtis and Portia have been so consumed by their own secrets, lies, and resentments that they have completely failed to realize the suffocating pressure they have placed on their daughter. Trina's outburst is the wake-up call they desperately needed, and it forces us to ask, will they finally step up and be the parents she deserves, or will their toxic cycle push her away forever? Through all the frustration, the questionable writing choices, and the dramatic shifts in tone, my dedication to General Hospital remains absolutely steadfast. We criticize because we care, and we analyze because these characters feel like an extension of our own families. The landscape of Port Charles may be fraught with unprecedented chaos, imposter villains, and shifting moral compasses, but the emotional core of the show, the legacy of love, survival, and family, still beats strongly beneath the surface. We will continue to watch, to hope, and to hold these writers accountable, because that is what true, lifelong fans do.